There is a single stretch of asphalt that connects the continental United States to its northernmost military fortress. It winds through 1,387 miles of Canadian wilderness, cutting through British Columbia and the Yukon Territory before finally crossing into Alaska. For over 80 years, the Alaska Highway has been the lifeline of American Arctic power. Every soldier stationed at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, every missile defense technician at Clear Space Force Station, every pound of fuel and ammunition supplying the most strategically critical military installations in the Western Hemisphere travels across Canadian soil to get there. The United States military has always assumed this road would be open. They assumed Canada would never dare to touch it. This morning, that assumption died. In a move that has sent the Pentagon into absolute crisis mode, the Canadian government has officially suspended all American military transit privileges through the Alaska Highway corridor. Effective immediately, no U.S. military convoys, no Defense Department shipments, no troop transports, and no classified cargo will be permitted to cross Canadian territory to reach Alaska. Mark Carney didn't announce this on television. He didn't call a press conference. He simply signed an emergency order invoking Canada's Sovereignty Protection Act, and with a single stroke of ink, he severed the United States military from 663,000 square miles of American territory. Donald Trump woke up this morning to discover that Alaska, the crown jewel of American Arctic dominance, is now an island, and he has absolutely no legal way to reconnect it. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how we reached this breaking point. I'm going to explain the military infrastructure that is now completely stranded without Canadian cooperation. I am going to show you the classified Pentagon assessments that warned this could happen and were ignored. And I am going to tell you exactly why this single decision by Mark Carney has fundamentally rewritten the balance of power in the Arctic, possibly for the rest of the century. This is not a trade dispute. This is not economic posturing. This is the most significant military logistics crisis the United States has faced since the Cold War. And Donald Trump's obsession with dominating Canada is the reason it just exploded in his face. To understand why this road closure is a 5-alarm emergency for the Pentagon, you have to understand the brutal geography of American military power in the Arctic. Alaska is not connected to the continental United States by land. Between Washington state and the Alaskan border lies the entire nation of Canada. There is no American highway, no American railway that connects the lower 48 states to Alaska without crossing Canadian soil. For decades, this was never a problem. Canada and the United States were so deeply aligned on defense that the border was a formality. American military convoys rolled through Canada as easily as they rolled through Montana. The Alaska Highway became a permanent artery of American power. Every year, billions of dollars worth of military equipment travels that road: F-35 components, Patriot missile systems, Arctic warfare vehicles, the fuel, food, and classified technology that keeps America's northern shield operational. Without that road, the only way to supply Alaska is by sea or by air. The terrifying math confronting the Pentagon is this: shipping military cargo by sea from Seattle to Anchorage takes 7 to 10 days. The route passes through the Gulf of Alaska, one of the most treacherous maritime corridors on Earth. Airlifting supplies cost roughly 15 times more than trucking. The C-17 aircraft required are already stretched thin globally. Mark Carney just placed a chokehold on the entire American Arctic military presence. He identified the single point of failure in American strategic planning and shut it down. Let's look at the receipts. Receipt number 1, the stranded installations. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage houses over 13,000 active duty personnel, the 11th Air Force, and Alaskan Command Headquarters. Clear Space Force Station operates advanced missile warning radar, a critical node in detecting ICBM launches from Russia, China, and North Korea. Fort Wainwright supports over 11,000 soldiers and serves as the primary Arctic warfare training ground. These are frontline strategic assets. Their primary supply line has been severed. Most installations maintain 30 to 90 days of operational reserves. If this standoff continues past 60 days, rationing begins at domestic bases. Receipt number 2, the missile defense nightmare. Alaska hosts the ground-based mid-course defense system at Fort Greely, America's primary shield against incoming ICBMs. The system requires constant maintenance and component replacements manufactured in the continental United States. Without highway access, those parts must be flown in at enormous expense. Any delay creates gaps in the defense umbrella. Mark Carney has given America's enemies a window of vulnerability. Receipt number 3, the fuel crisis. Military operations in Alaska consume millions of gallons annually. A single F-22 burns 25,000 pounds of fuel per flight hour. Training exercises and combat readiness operations demand constant resupply. The primary delivery method has been overland transport through Canada. Pipeline infrastructure from Canadian refineries supplemented American supply chains for decades. With the highway closed, the U.S. military is scrambling for alternatives. Maritime deliveries from Washington state, emergency contracts with commercial carriers, every option is more expensive and less reliable. The cost of maintaining readiness just doubled overnight. American taxpayers will foot the bill for failed diplomacy. So how did we get here? How did the most integrated defense partnership in the world collapse into a logistics catastrophe? The answer is a pattern of arrogance, threats, and fundamental miscalculation emanating directly from the Oval Office. For months, Donald Trump has been treating Canada not as a sovereign ally, but as an obstacle to American ambition. He has slapped tariffs on Canadian goods, threatened to annex Canadian territory, and publicly humiliated Canadian officials on the world stage. He has called Mark Carney a globalist puppet. He has suggested that Canada should become the 51st state. He has treated the longest undefended border in human history like a negotiating chip in a real estate deal. But the final trigger for this crisis came 72 hours ago. During a heated phone call that sources describe as completely unhinged, Donald Trump reportedly demanded that Canada grant the United States permanent, unrestricted military transit rights through Canadian territory. He wanted a formal treaty that would strip Canada of any authority to regulate American military movements on its own soil. He essentially demanded that Canada surrender a portion of its sovereignty at gunpoint. Mark Carney's response was immediate and devastating. He hung up the phone, and then he signed the order that closed the highway. The message was unmistakable. Canada is not a vassal state. Canada is not a doormat. And Canada will not be bullied into surrendering control of its own territory, no matter how loud the President of the United States screams. This brings us to the fundamental contrast that is defining this entire conflict. Donald Trump believes that power means domination. He believes that the United States, by virtue of its size and military strength, has the right to dictate terms to smaller nations. He believes that threats and intimidation are the most effective tools of diplomacy. He views every relationship as a hierarchy with America at the top and everyone else fighting for scraps. Mark Carney believes something entirely different. He believes that power means leverage. He believes that even a middle power can defeat a superpower if it identifies the right pressure points and applies force at the right moment. He doesn't need to match American military spending. He doesn't need to threaten American cities. He just needs to understand the systems that American power depends on and position Canada as an indispensable node in those systems. The Alaska Highway is a perfect example. For 80 years, the United States took that road for granted. They assumed it would always be there. They built their entire Arctic military strategy around the assumption of Canadian cooperation. Carney looked at that assumption, identified it as a vulnerability, and exploited it with surgical precision. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't post threats on social media. He simply studied the map, found the choke point, and closed it. This is the difference between a leader who reacts and a leader who plans. Trump reacts to headlines. Carney plans for decades. Trump measures success in news cycles. Carney measures success in strategic positioning. And right now, the strategic position of the United States in the Arctic has been catastrophically weakened because the man in the Oval Office couldn't resist the urge to bully his closest neighbor. Now let's zoom out and examine why this matters far beyond the immediate military crisis. The Arctic is not a frozen wasteland. It is the next great frontier of global competition. As climate change accelerates the melting of polar ice, the Arctic is opening up to resource extraction and shipping routes that were impossible just 20 years ago. Beneath the ice lies an estimated 13% of the world's undiscovered oil reserves, 30% of its natural gas, and vast deposits of rare earth minerals critical to advanced technology manufacturing. The Northwest Passage, threading through Canadian Arctic waters, is becoming a viable alternative to the Panama Canal for global shipping. Nations are scrambling to stake their claims. Russia has been aggressively militarizing its Arctic coastline, building new bases, deploying new submarines, and conducting provocative exercises. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing billions in polar research and infrastructure. The competition for Arctic dominance is one of the defining geopolitical contests of the 21st century, and the United States just lost its primary staging ground. Without reliable access to Alaska, the U.S. military cannot project power into the Arctic effectively. They cannot respond quickly to Russian provocations. They cannot secure American interests in the polar resource race. They are playing the most important game of the century with one hand tied behind their back. Mark Carney understands this perfectly. By controlling access to Alaska, Canada has made itself the gatekeeper of American Arctic ambitions. Every military operation, every resource expedition, every strategic initiative that the United States wants to pursue in the polar region now requires Canadian cooperation. Carney hasn't just closed a road. He has positioned Canada as the indispensable partner for Arctic dominance, and he has made it absolutely clear that partnership comes with conditions. What does this mean for you? Why should an American citizen care about a highway closure in the Yukon? Because you are going to pay for this crisis. When the Pentagon airlifts supplies that used to travel by truck, costs skyrocket. Those costs get passed to taxpayers through higher procurement budgets. Your tax dollars are about to buy significantly less national security. Alaska is a major node in American resource extraction. Oil from the North Slope, natural gas from Cook Inlet, critical minerals from interior Alaska all contribute to American energy independence. If military supply chain disruptions spill over into commercial logistics, the cost of extracting those resources increases. That means higher energy prices. That means inflation pressure on everything from gasoline to electronics. America's allies are watching this unfold. They are watching the United States get outmaneuvered by a nation with 1/10 its military budget. If the United States cannot maintain reliable access to its own territory, how can it guarantee the security of distant allies? American credibility is taking a direct hit. So what happens next? Here are the three scenarios playing out. Scenario A, the diplomatic retreat. Cooler heads in the administration recognize that this crisis is unsustainable. They approach Ottawa through back channels, offering significant concessions on tariffs. They agree to treat Canada as a genuine partner. Carney agrees to restore transit privileges under a new framework guaranteeing Canadian sovereignty. Trump claims victory, pretending he negotiated a better deal, but the power dynamic has permanently shifted. Scenario B, the military escalation. Trump, enraged by the humiliation, orders the Department of Defense to explore forcing passage through Canadian territory. American military convoys approach the border, creating a standoff with Canadian authorities. NATO fractures, global markets collapse. It would be the most severe rupture in Western alliance history. Scenario C, the Arctic realignment. The standoff drags on for months. The United States, unable to efficiently supply Alaska, begins scaling back its Arctic military presence. Russia and China move to fill the vacuum. Canada deepens its security partnerships with European allies. A new Arctic security architecture emerges that does not center on American leadership. We are witnessing the unraveling of assumptions that govern North American security for generations. The idea that Canada would always defer to American interests. The idea that geography guaranteed American access to its own territory. All being tested and found wanting. Mark Carney demonstrated that a nation does not need aircraft carriers to challenge a superpower. It needs intelligence. It needs patience. It needs willingness to identify vulnerabilities and exploit them at the decisive moment. Donald Trump demanded Alaska access as if it were his birthright. Mark Carney pointed out that birthright flows through Canadian soil, and then he closed the gate. The mainstream media will frame this as a diplomatic spat. Do not believe that narrative. This is a fundamental restructuring of North American power relations. The United States has been exposed. Its strategic vulnerabilities have been mapped and exploited. History will remember this moment as the day American Arctic dominance began its decline. It will remember a single road through the wilderness and the leader who had the strategic clarity to close it. The question now is whether Washington has the wisdom to adapt. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Carney go too far, or did Trump leave him no choice? Stay vigilant. Stay informed. The map just changed forever.